Hello, this is the ATM Train Fan, and I'm here with Rare Tyco Trains That You Need to Find, Part 4. In this episode, it's titled Locos and Freight Cars. This video will mostly cover locomotives, which is not only my collection, but also a visuality of what are some of the trains that are not only hard to find, but at the same time visualized through this video to show how not only what it looks like, but also some of the little backstories that sometimes can have to claim on its rarity. Without further ado, let's get the engines on the roll. Starting off, I got my profile picture here, which I always like to set up just because the Game Pacific 2459 Bobber is my profile picture, but I usually like to play here for the starter to indicate, hey, this is actually my channel to indicate for Bobber. But let's start with the engines. Firstly, we have a New York Central booster, but it's unlike any other New York Central booster. This is a maintenance of the way New York Central booster, which is from the late 1950s, and what makes this booster unique is not only with the maintenance of the way yellow scheme, but also a snowplow, which a snowplow can be added by not only adjusting a screw here to remove the front coupler, but also attaching it on, which only takes one screw. And this snowplow can be featured in different maintenance of the way sets. And with these locos, they also appear in other sets too with 4 cars. Which I don't know much on the cars though, since this video mostly covers locomotives. But this is the New York Central maintenance of the way booster. Next we have a pair known as a loco and a caboose, and just recently, which I mentioned in the past, where I can able trying to find one of the cabooses for this specific unit, and I finally found it. But this is a rare loco and caboose set. This is known as the Republic Steel train pair, and what it has is a Plymouth switcher blue with a horn on top, and the bottom is supposed to be silver. And this set right here appeared in the 1960 and 61 Tyco catalog, which the other train featured in the past catalogs. But what makes this set rare is not only the engine itself, but also the caboose as well, which the symbol on it is exactly the same as the unit here, but in yellow. But here with the caboose, it's not a white color, it's actually a dense, like a bluish white color, and it's the only bobber that has this color. So this pair here, it was actually in the set like this. It had 2 girder cars and this pair here. And with all of those, it would be not only hard to find, but also valuable too. But this pair right here is a perfect example on when a unit belongs with a caboose. It's like a pair. Next, we have a few shifters known as 040s, but with a tender. But this first one here is also another pair, which is coming up. But some of these, they're not usually good runners, but they're usually engulfed in my not only really big collection, but at the same time, here it comes. Sorry, it's struggling. So this shifter from the early 1960s is a Delaware and Hudson with caboose set, and this specific set also appeared in the 1960 and 61 on catalog titled Delaware and Hudson. But with this specific set, that it's the rare version, is because not many of these were made, since it was a separate deal set. If the camera could focus. So Delaware Hudson is actually marked on here. This is actually not customized. And this right here 99, is the most common number associated to the Tyco shifters. But as for the set right here, it also includes the caboose. But the older caboose was in this shade right here. the newer caboose is in yellow, which came along with the Tyco Power Torque Delaware and Hudson, which I sadly don't have. But for the caboose, sorry for the unit, it's not like cooperating well because this was recently bought a year ago, but it's still having a little bit of a lag. But here's the caboose, which not only supports the Delaware and Hudson, but also the symbol as well. And nextly, I have another shifter to show you. But this shifter has an additional detail that, unlike any other shifters from Tyco, this one has an additional. This is not only a Tyco shifter, but a Tyco shifter with an additional side rod, which you can see right here. These extra components right here are usually add-ons to the locomotive to make it more realistic. Unlike the other shifter example, it only has a couple of centric rods, but these ones right here, they're added on. From another kit. But this loco is not only very satisfying, but at the same time, finding locos with this additional add-on with the side rods is not only hard to find, but at the same time, it can also be transferred as well too to other locos, but it only depends on what the model is. Next, we have a few GP20s, but these GP20s have a few differences. The first GP20 is a New York Central GP20, but it's not an ordinary. It's not an ordinary GP20 New York Central. This specific GP20 now supports the New York Central scheme. This engine was also cataloged in the 60s Tyco's catalog. But what makes this engine unique is, a while back, you can buy this part here, which is an extra fan separately from the loco, since the locos don't always include this top piece. I add this one on here is because it supports the scheme of the New York Central better, but it can also fit on other locos. But when this came separately, which is molded in black plastic, it can also be it can be painted to match the other locos, but with the piece remaining unpainted, is actually hard to find. And this New York Central is also an original runner too, since it has an original sound to it. But next, I have another GP20, which is also another original, but it also sports a different scheme, unlike the earlier one mentioned in a different part 1 and part 2 video. It's not the cotton belt. Sorry for derailment, but it's the Southern Pacific GP20, and then for this one also not only has a black bottom, which the other one had a different bottom. This one also is the same shell used for the cotton belt, which I don't have right now because it's featured on a different video. But the Southern Pacific one here, this is printed. This is actually not custom. But the cotton belt and the Southern Pacific not only both share the same shell with the noses being the same color, but also having the same scheme. And that goes for the Southern Pacific. Nextly, we have a whole fleet of F units, but these F units, they all have differences. So this first one here is a Chesapeake and Ohio F7A, but this F7A has a little surprise with it. With certain F7s, some of them can have double power, which just like in the last episode with part 3 with the Pennsylvania, where more cars can be pulled with 2 motors added to the unit, but it doesn't always work. It's because one motor would usually run faster than the other, which can be not only unreliable, at the same time, the units have very small traction tires on them, which when they occasionally start slipping, it will eventually tear off. And these traction tires are very hard to replace, which if you look closely on the black wheels, there's little traction tires on these. And once these break off, these are hard to replace. And this plastic piece here, which is actually melted in to the metal sheeting on the bottom. So it's not only a good runner, but at the same time, these locos, they can be a little bit maintenance intensive because with not only the double power, but also valuable as well. But that's not the only double power unit I have. Also, I have another double power unit, but it's actually a Burlington, and I'm picking this one up is because it not only has a double power unit, but sadly, like what I said, most units, when they usually have double power, some of them don't run because one motor goes faster than the other. But sometimes when it usually works, one more runs, the other one is just dragging. But sadly, with this dragging, it caused the traction tires to come apart, which the traction tires are right here. So it's not the easiest locomotive to not only run, but at the same time, it can be a little hard to really face these little tires, which are called traction tires. But I'm presenting this locomotive because not only the Burlington's hard to find in an F7, but at the same time, a double power unit is also valuable. But I wouldn't recommend taking these apart and putting the extra non-power powered bogie on it because double power units were experimental locomotives, and finding these are not only hard to find, but certain ones they can be replaced since they were made to be experimental and also heavy pullers. Yeah, so this one may not run and function properly, and this is the only F7A in the Burlington scheme that I have in my collection, so I'm not gonna completely ruin this one. And nextly, we have a deluxe locomotive, which unlike the Montua locomotives, this one's a Deluxe Great Northern F7A, which it not only has the black bottom, but also it supports it poses the, I don't know what scheme this is actually called, but it's like a Great Northern Rocky Mountain scheme, but I'm not entirely sure since I know I'm not doing much of the schemes, but this is one of the Great Northerns that Tyco made for the Deluxe series, which is not only hard to find, but at the same time, certain ones will usually support different logos, but I am not too sure if they would have a logo in the front, unlike certain other locomotives like the Burlington and the Chesapeake and Ohio, which I featured. But nextly, I have a Montua Great Northern, but this Great Northern is completely different than the other ones. This Great Northern is almost like the Empire Builder logo, but it's completely different. But I'm not entirely sure the name of it, so I would only present it. But it not only has the logo and the different Great Northern scheme, but it's also a double power unit as well, which I currently have three F7A double power units in this video for the presentation, but it not only has with the traction tires and the double power unit, but with certain units they can run, but other ones they can't due to one motor having a lack than the other. But this one here, both motors they run fine, but it's a very sketchy runner due to not only it has double power, but at the same time, if one of these motors ends up not working, this one of them run, and this will end up dragging the locomotive, which definitely did not do this. It will break the traction tires. But this is the Montua one, because the Montua ones would usually have screws on the bottom, which are new from the Montua ones, because in the past, if I take another example model, once these rivets prevent access of getting inside the motor, so Montua ended up changing it by adding screws, which can make the units more accessible. These units, when they don't work or a motor has to be rechanged, these rivets are drilled out, this piece can come off, and not only the wheels can be accessible, but also the motor in the middle as well. But sadly, it doesn't always happen. And once these rivets are removed, the original the motor can not only can be shot, but at the same time it can be very fragile. But with the Great Northern, these can be a little bit more accessible. So newer Montua, after when it was sadly bought out, made these models much more accessible, unlike the older models. But nextly, we have another F7A, but this F7A has a bit of a defect. And what I mean by defect is, it's a factory air unit. I don't have the other model to compare it to see how it actually looks, but I have only the factory air unit. It's a factory air Canadian Pacific. And what this Canadian Pacific has, it makes it a little different than other units. Because this unit here has the name Canadian Pacific and the 4107 stamped the wrong way around. Because in the printing, the unit is supposed to be printed almost this way with the number on this end and the Canadian Pacific and the lettering face this way, which all the numbers would usually face in the back. But if you look closely, the number is in the front, which when it's supposed to be in the back. And if you look very closely, the printing on the Canadian Pacific is embedded into the rivets, which these spaces here are supposed to fit on these little rivets right here, which this one has a spacing. It's supposed to be on the rivet, so, and the spacing here is almost good, but it's supposed to, but the Canadian Pacific on that side needs to be put on this side. But sadly, the printing was flawed on some of these units. But with the normal Canadian Pacific, it would be completely different. But this is a factory air unit, and a way to tell us, not only with the spacing seems a little off, since it has to be on these rivets, but also the N on here is printed right on the rivets, which shows this was stamped the wrong way. But even though with the stamped it incorrectly, it's still a very valuable unit, because factory air units are usually troubleshoots with the factories, not only stamping units, but also its differences as well. Well, not only with the spacing, but its design as well too. So even with factory airing, they're still good units. And we also have a small series of Alco, Tyco, and Montua shark noses. And firstly, we have a few original units, but we're starting from almost newest to oldest. But I'm not too sure the years on these units, but here's one of the shark noses. This specific shark nose not only included with the horn, but also an active light as well too. But the main difference is the older these Montuas, they were dating back from the early and late 1950s, had the exposed gear, which eventually in 1960 they were covered due to hair and other debris getting inside the units. But with this shark nose, it was included in a few passenger sets. And these passenger sets are not only streamlined, but also they match the locos very well. And these are not only very loud runners, but at the same time, these have a power to them. And next, other than with a streamline, which this is actually like a Tyco scheme, another scheme was also released too, but this one is different. This one is not. Yeah, this one's not running, but it's going. So it's most of these units were not tested out for a while, but I'll display this one here for a little bit to show you this next scheme. It also Tyco and Montua also came out with the Union Pacific, which this is actually not custom. Tyco actually released these, and they not only support the Union Pacific scheme, but also they also had gray bogies which match with the scheme here. But most of the time, the paint here on the bogies would fade away, which could sometimes end up leading the bogies to turn black. Which sadly, this one ended up turning black because the paint completely came sadly right off. But with most of these, they're usually attached differently with rivets, unlike the other ones that were supported by plastic. So this has almost like a heavy metal construction. But here's the Union Pacific scheme, and also this loco is another similar unit, which like this unit. But the next one that's coming up is completely different than the other two, and this one is actually my fourth double powered, and it's actually a monster. It's a heavy, yeah, it's a not only a heavy unit, but at the same time, it's an older unit as well. It's a Tyco, not only a Tyco shark nose, but also a Tyco branded shark nose, which not only these support a notable scheme, but also some of these were also double powered, which, just like last time we mentioned with the Great Northern, Chesapeake and Ohio, and Burlington, it's meant to pull more cars, but most of the time the motors don't actually run the same. But this one does, and also has the older style couplers, which these came out somewhere in the late 50s to replace the older loop couplers, which are a little different, which hopefully the screen can focus. Which these can connect differently to the modern cars, but sadly most of them are the knuckles. But these horn hooks, they're attached different with a little hook on here, which connects to the loop. If you can focus, it's not the best, but I'll put this one here. So the little hook right there, which can be a little hard to see, and the loop, this is where the little hook usually latches on to connect the older style freight cars, which this unit can able to pull some of them, but sadly with the conversion of trying to put the swap the bogies out, I would definitely not recommend, because I'd rather keep it like original, which in Tyco collections, it's better to keep things how they are. So they're completely original. Wrong way. And lastly, to complete with the shark noses and certain other units, there's also another rare gem as well too, which sadly this one can't pull any cars, but in visualization, other than the F7As that released a certain kind of unit, the Sharknose also released B units, which the F7As have, but B units are hard to find. This one was actually not pushed. This is actually a hard to find powered B unit, which can not only pull more cars, but at the same time, it can also make those really nice F7A BBA sets, and also a Sharknose ABA set, which is not only insane, but also at the same time, they can also pour more cars too, which underneath it has the motor. But sadly, the coupler, the bogies with the certain coupler is sadly not on the unit, because this unit came from a kit, but I don't know if the kit ended up including coupler. So this unit is currently not only a free runner, but sadly it can't pull any cars. Except it can actually push cars, but I would definitely not recommend it. So anything with shark noses, especially the metal ones from the late 1950s, and also with the 60s as well too, which they were still released, are not only valuable but also hard to find. Next we have an only Alco 430 unit, which I did feature a few of them in the part 3, but this one I didn't feature, so I decided to feature it in a different video. Nextly, we have I don't know if this one's going to run since this is the motor. I'm not too sure, so I think I may have to bring this one along. But this is an Alco 430 Sooline, which most Soolines are not only uncommon, but at the same time, they would usually have the Sooline in the front, which sadly this one is a little faded. But Sooline Alcos are not only hard to find, but at the same time, they usually have those schemes which now companies usually try to produce. This, and unlike the other ones that were featured that have all rivets, this one has two different kinds of rivets, which these are the rivets that are featured the longest, and these ones are the newer ones, which most 60s and late 60s and 70s Tycos had. Yeah, when most units don't run or they have like a problem, the light would usually turn extremely bright, and the motor would not turn. So this one has to be maintenance. Even though I didn't do it in the video because I want to present as much train as possible because of not only short of time, but also busyness as well. And the next set that I have, which unlike the Chesapeake and Ohio double power unit, which I showed, this pair actually is actually different, and it's also the harder variant to find in the Chesapeake and Ohio Tyco realm. It's the first scheme of the Chesapeake and Ohio F7As, but this one has its pair because these two were from a set which I bought a while back, and these units are not only the first editions, but at the same time they had gray bottoms, which gray bottoms are usually the hard to find because they were usually the first edition. But for the F7As, the shark noses had black bottom. Those were eventually changed. But underneath is the power unit, which this one has the cover, but the next unit I'll be showing is completely different, and it's from 1959. But with the Chesapeake and Ohio set, this set is the older variant, but with the Chesapeake and Ohio, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to lift the motor. This one is the newer variant, which has the blue top and a gray bottom. The older variants have the gray top and the blue top. So a year change around where one ski keeps on going, all of a sudden a change happens. And this one, it not only has the first edition scheme, is not only hard to find, but at the same time, this one here, not only the double power, but also the newer scheme can also be tricky to find too, especially ones in somewhat decent condition. This one here is in good condition, but it only depends on its use. But as for the set right here, this one is kind of played around with, but the only thing is trying to like get any of the schemes as possible, especially with the Chesapeake and Ohio one like this. But the next one that I mentioned that was from 1959 and also has a really nice scheme is the 1 second, it's coming. But this one also is in a pair, so it also has a caboose with it. It's the Baltimore and Ohio F7A with a B unit and bobber. But with this over here, what makes these three trains rare is that this F7A has a feature that was just like the shark nose units, but it ended up changing in the 1960s because this unit right here, which I will handle carefully, is the first edition, which when the F7As came out in 1959, they had the exposed gear configuration, which was now it had the same issue as the shark noses with the debris getting caught, but at the same time, it can also have a use to it. It's easier to lubricate the units, which this one's an exposed gear, but with the other year units, they would usually have the covers. But the more good example is the one that's closer to that age, is the ones with the covers. So it's much more easier. It's much less likely for stuff to get inside the gears and end up jamming in the unit. But going on with the Baltimore and Ohio, the B unit is also hard to find too, is because it usually appears in certain passenger sets, which most B units are included with. but this one's a newer one because of the black bottom. But I put this in as like a presenter set to show that other schemes and other locos can have their possession. And lastly, the bobber. This bobber was only featured in certain sets in the late 1950s, and it belongs with the F7A, which the B unit was not included because of the pasture sets. But this bobber has the bigger logo in a yellow print. The older ones have a white, which I don't have it right now, but this is the trains I'm presenting. But next, with the Baltimore scheme, is also one of the harder to find schemes, which Tyco did experiment with, but sadly it didn't continue on because of probably knowing how complex it was, but also the factors as well too, that these units right here that are coming up may have a defect. Here they come. It's the chrome Baltimore and Ohio, which was only featured in 2 years from 1964 catalog, which is 1 year, and the 64-65 catalog, which is another year. But what makes this set a little different is it's reflective, which shows a chrome style too. And with the pasture sets those included in, it also has the B unit as well too, which this one is not powered. It's only the F7A. It only has the black bottom, but it also has the reflective look on it too, which if you could see, my hand is reflective on it. And this engine is not only hard to find, but at the same time, when it comes to handling these locos, it's best to pick it up underneath the tank or with gloves, because these units can be very easily stained. Like if one fingerprint ends up going to it, it would end up staining the whole unit because of finger oils. So it comes to picking up the unit like this, but I would recommend handling it in a certain way, probably with gloves, since it's not the easiest loco to handle. And I was only doing this to show you the underneath. It's got the motor underneath in it, and it also has the same symbol. But with a scheme like this, it didn't last long because of how easy it can not only be like dirty, but also it's very easy to think that these locomotives are actually probably one of the rarest, but with chromes. And it's and it still has the same scheme, but with the lines as the older B&O, but it displays a different paint scheme, which this is the first edition, but these came on as like a special edition. But with these two units, they're not only one of the rarest, but at the same time, they also have a very mirror-like scheme. And the last loco I'm going to feature before moving on some of the freight cars is actually a steam locomotive, but unlike any other steam locomotive, which I have to set it up, because I'm this time presenting the trains rolling into the video instead of picking up by hand, because I know most viewers want to see the trains running. Make sure everything is set. Here it comes. And sorry, I got a couple of problems, but here it comes. It's a Chesapeake and Ohio Pacific, and this is actually a newer Pacific, is because the newer units would have a 473 on it, but the older ones would usually have a completely different number. But Chesapeake and Ohio did release one of these units in the set all the way back in 1961, but it supports a different number. And with the newer Pacifics, they would usually have 4 screws on the bottom. The older ones have them. But with the newer Pacifics, if I pick it up, it would have 5 screws underneath, which that 5th screw, this 3rd screw by the gear is where it holds the motor, because in the past, older Pacifics would have 4 screws, but 1 screw would hold the motor. So when it comes to taking it apart, the unit would completely fall apart. So 5 screws were added to able to maintain what screws to remove and take off. But this is the C&O Chesapeake and Ohio Pacific, which is not only made for a couple years, but at the same time, they're valuable. And lastly, we have the freight car. It has some of the freight cars, which is a loco and freight car video. So the first few freight cars are going to be coming in. So apparently in part 2 or part 1 of the rare Tyco trains that you need to find, I had a bobber for a caboose, but sadly I'm missing the 8. It was missing the 8-wheel caboose, and both of these are prized possessions, which I'm using the Candy Dancer to pull them. It's the Atlantic Coastline caboose sets, which this bobber here only appeared in the few sets back in the 1960s with the first edition F unit, which is a darker purple color, but in the mid 1960s, an 8-wheel caboose was released with it, which these are not valuable, but at the same time these can be a little bit confusing to find because of how closely they represent the Santa Fe and other types of cabooses. But this one was only released in a few sets back in the late 1960s, along with the bobber. And to complete the set, to complete this video, I have a little train to show you, which also presents some valuable cars as well too. So lastly in this video is a short train, but this train has a bunch of rare cars on it. So the first car is a Brock's candy car, which is out of all the sugar cars made, which were 3 different ones. The Brock's candy car is the most valuable, is because this one only appeared in 1 catalog in only 2 sets, and it was not only exclusive, but at the same time it had only a few sets to be shown in and presented in, and then which was probably an exclusive collaboration with Tyco and Brock's. And also the cover can be removed too, but this one I ended up buying off someone who ended up customizing the model, so the lid sadly can't lift. But with other sugar cars, the lid can probably be removed in order to form from a regular hopper, which are actually rattlers. And next off, we have another car, which this is actually a small candy series, is the Mars Milky Way Reefer, which has a very strange brown color, which closely represents chocolate. But this car only came in 1 set as well too, which is a set in 1961 with a shifter set. And the is support of a one-of-a-kind color, just like the Republic Steel bobber caboose. And lastly, we have another small set as well too. It's the Tyco RCA Silver Lima cars, which came in a Plymouth Switcher boxcar gondola, which I have, and a bobber caboose. The full set I don't have, but with the visualization of these cars, they have a printed RCA on the bobber, which is the caboose, and they also have the printings on a black gondola too, which are exclusive to the set, but these printings right here, they were not added on. These were decorations from another, since I bought this car from the car. So these cars right here are not only very hard to find, but at the same time, these were an exclusive set late back in the 1950s. And with all these cars, that's all I have. That's all I have. And for part 4 of Rare Tyco Trains that you need to find, part 4, Locos and Freight. So even though the video was a little bit of a mix-up with the trains, but I was able to, but is what I have for the presentation of visualizations of why are some trains, they're not like hard to find, but at the same time, what do they look like in the video. But this video is not meant for Tyco, but at the same time, it's also all about trains. So that's all I have for part 4, and I hopefully you enjoyed it, even though it was long though, but I hope you enjoyed the long clip, and I hope to see you on another future Rare Tyco Trains that you need to find video. Hope for part 5, but it's going to be possible though if